Secrets of ornamentation. Well, I'm going to say my opinion on ornamentation and my opinion of how it has worked for me. And certainly, I think it's worked for a lot of other people. So I think there are three main things we should talk about. One is simply how to do it, the techniques, at least. And we're talking mostly about cross-string ornamentation. That's the main reason for this talk. After, I'd like to talk about why we should do it, and then also where we should do it, in which pieces and in which situations. Where should we use cross-string trills or mordants, ornaments, etc. When I was a student, I heard some recordings of Ida Presti and La Goya, and they were the first people that I heard playing the trills on two strings. They're fantastic. You can hear it. There's an old recording of them playing Passacaglia by Handel, and Ida Presti does the trill. It's superb, totally amazing. And I was blown away by that. And I thought, wow, I've got to learn to do this. And so at first, when I started doing it, most of the critics and things didn't seem to like it very much in Britain. One of them said that, or wrote that my trill sounded like an old-fashioned doorbell, which was not very complimentary, but so anyway, I liked it, so I kept on going. You know, if you think of the players that I was listening to at that time, well, it's Segovia, of course, John Williams and Julian Bream, mainly them. No, they didn't use these trills, not because they couldn't, but simply it was not really something that people liked. But certainly once I got it working, it made a big difference to a lot of my repertoire, because I think it made some of my Baroque music sound maybe different from some other people. And certainly it was a lot of fun in the Scarlatti pieces and Bach cadences, etc., to include it. So at first, I tried to use basically what I assumed that Ida Presti was doing, and that is the technique where it's basically it's like a tremolo. I'm just going to tip this so you can see my right hand. So it would be A, I, M, P. So just as if you were doing, but with the M passing on to the second string. It's fairly easy to do that. You can get it going quite fast without any problem. The only thing is that I've always played with quite a lot of side angle to get the sound that I want. When you do that, the M finger really catches if you're sideways, and the I finger has to stretch out too much. If you're the kind of player that plays like that, perhaps it'll work fine, but it doesn't work for me. So I changed to using A, I, M, P. Partly just because the I and the P sit very easily on the second string and the AM sit on the first string. That started to work very well for me. I also found that I didn't need to actually move the arm to pluck the thumb. So that's really what I was aiming at. A process where you can basically get rid of all the irregularities that we may have when we do this. Now, normally when you do that, the thumb is going to be too loud, right? So we really have to learn to pluck the thumb to sound just the same as the fingers. That's it's quite an important thing. So usually the thumb is used on the bass strings, and so we're not so careful about the actual tone quality because it doesn't really suffer, you know. You play it any old way and it works. Once it goes into the second string, it really has to be more carefully filed and things. So we do that. I found that to develop the speed and the flexibility in the trill, I first of all started the thing of playing these two together and these two together. When I was doing that eventually, that goes pretty fast. And then you just separate them just keep that going. That would be a trill starting on the lower note. Usually start on the upper note, because although not always, but in the Baroque music, I think it's better to be able to start on the upper note. After I got the the trills working, I think it's important to have maybe a set of basic ornaments. That is lower mordant and upper mordant. So I have a pattern for that. So use the 3 fingers, A, I, M. It's so easy to play that fast and smooth and things. So if you have a little ornament, well, I'm in a D string, but you know, just it's really easy to put in a little simple ornament that is just going to adorn your piece a little bit. The lower one, the upper one, you might not use it so much, but it's a strange thing that if you are playing Baroque music and you do this kind of ornament and you do that, sometimes it doesn't really sound very Baroque, whereas sounds okay because of that kind of crispness that the 2-string trill gives to your music, or to your sound, if you like. So this one, so that's no right hand, just left hand. That one sounds a little bit like Giuliani or Villalobos even, whereas this one can sound much more like Scarlatti, if you like. So if you want to do an upper mordant, pretty much that is going to work better. Singers were still kind of in the technique thing. A lot of this is going to work better if you use a bright sound. If you have a dark, you know, fat sound, I'm not sure here on the computer if you're going to be aware of it, but if your sound is, and you do an ornament like that, it's too fluffy. It's much better to have a bright, which means playing a little bit more straight across the string, not so much angle. But it depends. That's getting into the aesthetics, the taste that one may have for it. But usually when I'm doing the Baroque music, I'm playing with a lot of ornaments. I usually play with a brighter sound generally, which would be straighter and pulling upwards more than sideways and pushing through. So let's see. So if you have and so on. I prefer to not, when you want a brighter sound, some people go towards the bridge. And certainly when you play down towards the bridge, you get more resistance from the string, which at times that feels good, but it often sounds too harsh. So I prefer to do it just by turning sideways. So the string still has a kind of softness to it that's too aggressive sounding. That would be a better word. So if I did the handle again and I played it here, I really don't like it. So I play it bright, but bright here. On our instrument, we don't really have to copy other instruments. We can do our own thing, if you like. But I remember when I was a young player, even the pretty good players, I'm going to exclude someone like John Williams or something that is totally exceptional technically, but many of the players, when the trill came, it was kind of scratchy in comparison to the rest of the playing, even really good players. And also my own trills, you know, so you'd have a piece going and you have, and they would be, and then there's the trill. It was just so weak in comparison to the rest of the piece. We all have heard the big Bach fugue or whatever, and there's that trill with B major thing, it just that. And whereas suddenly it just sounds much more alive and bright. And if you think, let's say, because we're talking about Bach in this case, Bach played several instruments, or whatever, but a lot of his pieces were written playing on the keyboard. When he plays the trill, it's actually louder than the single notes. The moment the double notes or the trill comes, whereas on the guitar and on the lute, etc., the trill is often actually quieter than the other notes. All the plucked notes are defined, and then the trill or the ornament is actually weaker. And so if you want that for the musical reasons or whatever, then that's fine. But if you want to keep the power that the ornament can give, well, I would say the two-string trill will definitely help it. That's one of the reasons. There's another reason would be that in our concert, we have some romantic pieces and some contemporary pieces and whatever, and some Baroque music, and maybe some earlier music, whatever. So if you are playing only the trills in your Baroque music, it's one more way of making that section of your concert sound different and not basically sound like yet some more Giuliani, or not because I don't like Giuliani, I love it, but we want them to sound distinguish one from the other. So using ornaments is one of the ways that your Baroque music can distinguish itself. There's another reason why I think it's pretty good to use these if you can do them well. And this is one of my reasons. I'm not sure if the players nowadays will want this or whatever, but we as concert players, we also have to distinguish ourselves from other players. So if you find something, maybe some repertoire or transcriptions, etc., whatever, that no one else plays, and you also are playing it in a way that no one else can do, maybe they can, but they're not doing it, well, that's one way of making your playing outstanding in its own way from the other players. Now, you know, nowadays there are lots and lots of really good players. So all of you young players have to find ways of being unique. And ornamentation is one of the ways. Now, if we use ornamentation, we follow the rules exactly, then we're all going to sound the same. So we do have to break out from the rules a little bit. And in many ways, the rules follow the players rather than the player follow the rules. But to break the rules, you should know the rules. So after we'll talk just a little bit about some of the literature that is written both in the Baroque period and also by studious people, so that we can understand, at least as far as possible, we can understand what they were doing. Now, I still have sometimes my doubts as to, you know, when something is written down, can you imagine if somebody was writing down how Segovia played? Will we really know how he played? Well, probably not, but we could have some idea of what he was transmitting, at least to that critic. So it's pretty good to be able to read what people were writing about the players and what some of the composers were writing as to how their ornamentation should be implemented, right? And some people say, well, Bach said, oh, don't do so much ornamentation. Well, maybe someone was tearing the arse out of it, so they were overdoing it, so he ended up as a person that says, don't do any ornamentation, yet he ornaments enormously in some of his pieces. And there are some pieces that he wrote down first without ornamentation, and then it was in a manuscript full of ornamentation. So it was definitely used. We're still talking about the why we're doing it. Now, but when we're doing it, if it sounds worse, don't do it. You know, if it's making your piece worse, just forget it. It's not worth it. You know, I would say it's an added luxury to ornament a lot, you know, and some players do it fantastically well, and sometimes you end up maybe enjoying more of their ornamentation than the piece itself. So we have to be careful, if you like. When you're starting to ornament, it would be really good to get a fairly simple Baroque piece that is completely unknown. So nobody knows what the original was. And so nobody has preconceived ideas about what should be done in this piece, you know. So if you start ornamenting the Bach Chaconne, just everybody thinks they know how it should be. And probably everybody is right in their own mind anyway. So if you ornament it, you're going to fight with their own preconceived ideas. So that's why when I did a lot of ornamentation in some, well, that Handel I just played and things like that, certainly all the keyboard players know that piece. The guitarists don't know it, or didn't know it at all. And so, of course, I think the last movement was known, but the first movement wasn't. So I could really do a lot of ornamentation on it, and or at least do as much as I think Handel wanted. And didn't have to fight with the audience's preconceived thoughts about it. The last year, I'm not sure if I played it in Tucson, but I've been playing a suite by a guy called Jacques Saint-Luc. And even historically, it's difficult to find out who he is because there are two of them. They're both from Belgium. They're probably related. And the suite is absolutely beautiful and it's relatively simple. So you can really go to town and do quite a lot to it. I just find a bit of it here. It's a really neat piece, but there's a little practice. So, and so on. So this is mostly left-hand trills because I decided to stick on that side, partly because of what the piece really is trying to say. But the idea is, before you head into ornamenting the well-known pieces, do some unknown pieces. And also, if they don't sound very good, it really doesn't matter. You can chuck them out. It doesn't have to be part of your repertoire anymore. You know, whereas if you do it on a very famous piece, it's maybe something that you do want to keep for many years in your life. I think we should distinguish between the ornaments that the composer has asked for in this piece. For example, in the Handel, there are a lot of markings. And so we as guitarists have to do our best to, if we're going to play that piece, we have to do our best to implement his ornamental signs, right? Now, we're not going to do what the keyboard can do because it's simply not possible. You know, it's just so much easier for them to do so many more things. So we really have to choose ornaments that are going to work for us. And so that's one kind of ornament. The other kind of ornament is the added stuff. You know, we just stick in a trill here or there, or little passing notes, or especially little mordants. Now, they can add color to the piece. Now, if you study the music by Couperin, for example, and other composers similar to him, often his music is really full of little markings. And right enough, if you take out all the ornaments from Couperin, it sounds pretty bare. If not naked. So it really needs those little frills. Now, if you try and do all that the keyboard player is doing, it's not really going to work. So we sometimes have to maybe choose some or even choose different ones. So I've been playing a lot of Couperin the last few years. It's been a lot of fun. And especially because I've really had to think about how I can put in the right ornaments. There are also another distinguishing thing between ornaments. You have ornaments in cadence ornaments. That is, the ornaments that are, say, well, like B to E or whatever. Those are really necessary. Right? I wouldn't even call them an ornament. That's a cadential trill is really integral part of the piece. But a little twiddle here or there, that's up to you, right? So that's, if you like, the added luxury or whatever you've decided to add to your piece. I think also we should think about, again, two, but there are probably more distinguishing things. If the music if you're doing a transcription and it comes from the keyboard, now even if it says lute on it, but say Bach did it on the keyboard first or whatever, the kind of ornaments may be different than a piece that is definitely a lute from the lute repertoire. So perhaps if you're playing Weiss or Katzberger or whatever, it may be that the cross-string trills might actually hurt the piece or change its character. Now, here we have a kind of dilemma that maybe each of us can resolve our own way. I mean, I've played some Handel, some Weiss, where I've decided I'm going to use the trills, the cross-string trills, because I feel once it's a transcription, it's a transcription. I don't have the same tuning as the lute, so I don't have the freedom for the open strings, etc. And I don't have a lute sound. The Baroque lute, it's quite a different instrument, even though the actual techniques are not vastly different from ours. But the sound production and everything is really very different to ours. So I did that once or twice with some suites by Weiss and some others. But generally, I wouldn't do that. Generally, I would prefer to keep it lute-like, not because I want to copy the lute itself, but I would like to be closer to where the composer may have had what he would have had in his mind when he was writing the piece. Perhaps. I mean, it's always a supposition from the part of the player. I would say our instrument has a closer relationship in terms of sound to the keyboard, well, to the harpsichord, if you like, than it does to bowed instruments or to blown instruments. All those instruments have the possibility to continue the power of the note through the note. We have a note that starts and dies from there forward, just like the keyboard. So I think our kind of ornamentation and our use of it and things is going to be more related to them than to what the violin can do or the cello, whatever. So I feel that when I'm playing music that may be originally written for the cello, for example, I'm no longer playing it on the cello. So if I want to copy the cello, I'm just going to be a weak version. I prefer to do everything that really sounds best for the guitar. Now, I think that those kind of trills sound great, so I use them quite a lot. Other people may don't, doesn't matter. You know, we each choose. There was another thing I've just marked down in some notes there. Some people worry about the situation of mixing them in the same piece. You know, can you do some on two strings, some on single strings? Well, yeah, I mean, sometimes you have to, because you simply are not able to put a two-string trill in, or you're not able to put a left-hand trill, so use the right hand. And sometimes it's almost whimsical. That is, you just say, well, what the hell, I like this, so I'll do it. And then next time you learn the piece, you do something. One of the examples is the Lure of the fourth lute suite, which I don't know if I've got it in here, but when I did that, the first time I did it, let's see, here it is. You know, I tried to do, and the whole worked it out and things, but in the end, it turned the piece into this kind of overly bright, slightly aggressive, tight sort of piece, and very different to what I really liked in the piece. So, although the rest of that suite, I would probably use much more two-string trills, in this movement, I prefer left-hand trills, you know, or left-hand ornaments most of the time, right? Now, there's another little thing that this is perhaps harking back to some of the some of the problem of the technique itself. Sometimes when you do a small ornament, like just a little lower mordant or something like that, you have to be really careful. Should it be a sharp or not a sharp? At times you can use both or either and things, but it will affect your the sound, if you like, and it'll affect the key, the harmony, if you like. You know, the famous. So when you do that, if we stick in a little ornament on the first one, it sounds quite different. Both are actually acceptable in this case. Or and then so. But you have to really choose. Now, use your ear, use your knowledge of harmony, counterpoint, whatever you have, and also listen to the people that maybe have more experience. Although most of the faces I'm seeing are very experienced people, but still, listen to what other people are doing and make your choices. But certainly, I've changed my idea or my mind over some of these. And I remember having an argument with someone actually about that one there, because this other person hated what I did and I hated what they did. And in the end, well, you know, we were both probably right and we're both wrong. You know, some ornaments you cannot change. You can't do that. But, you know, in E minor, both actually, they have a pretty neat sound to it. So once we move into once we've got the basic trills done, we should talk about what extra you're going to do. So this is going back to the how, the technique itself, right? After you have the simple one, then slightly extended. There, what I did was I used AIMP and I added on AI again. So reason I learned that one because sometimes the four notes it's just a little bit short. It's not really generous enough. And so in some pieces, slightly longer trill is better. Slightly longer. If you go the full 2 rounds, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, it's too much, right? You find in some Scarlatti, the famous that one there, it's got some really nice little runs. It's somewhere up here. Scarlatti, this one here. And I'll see if I can play this. And it does that many, many times. You've got that little motif there, a run finishing with a little trill. And yeah, you could finish it with just 4 notes, like just it's just a little bit short, you know, and it almost makes you want to play the piece faster. Whereas if you can add on those extra 2 notes. So we've got the 4-note trill, the 6-note trill, and then this 8-note trill. Right, and so on, right? Now, I would say when you learn the piece, decide clearly how many you're going to do. Because when you get to your concert, you're full of adrenaline, your fingers work much faster, and then you go brrr, and you stick way too many notes in, and it just doesn't sound good. So it's better to actually play fewer notes, but really well, than just do a really fast trill that's just a mess, right? And in fact, if you listen carefully to many of the keyboard players, the harpsichord players, their trills are not so fast. You know, on the keyboard, because they are completely even, you know, the 2 notes sound just exactly the same volume. There's a strength in it that we often don't get because we usually have one is louder, the other is less, one is brighter, and so on. So really, if you listen to them, I recorded a couple. I'm not sure if you're going to be able to hear them here, but let's see these memo notes. So, Princess. So, dum, dum. Okay. So it's not so fast, right? There's a beautiful piece by Bach that goes, let's see, it's one of these Sinfonia, and it goes like this. So on, anyway. And Bach wrote that first without any ornamentation, and then he ornamented it. So we should study it to see what his ideas were. Where can you put in a little run, for example? So there we get, from our little simple ornament, we add in the run to it. So from that, you'll discover that you take your simple ornament, then you have to have exits and entrances to it. That is, how to get out of the ornament, not just play the ornament and then next note. Well, at times, yes, but at times there may be a turn on the end, or upward, downward, and the entrance is not always just, sorry, but is, so with the run, it just adds a whole lot extra to it, right? You'll find many cases where we guitarists tend to play the ornament, stop, then do the exit. We've got to integrate them, and they really sound better when they belong to each other, right? There are lots, and this piece is a really neat piece to study. It's the Sinfonia, or three-part invention, number 5. BWV 791. There we go. It's a neat piece to study, and it's a fantastic piece to play. I mean, it's really, I've played it sometimes in concerts, and it's just so beautiful. I've got several harpsichordists playing it, you know, and because it's a very slow piece, their ornaments are relatively slow. I mean, really slower than we do it. You know, and they sound great. So sometimes I like to practice to see if I can really get, I want, not today, fingers not working, but when you do that, as close in quality of sound between the two notes. But on the guitar, of course, second string, third string, there's always going to be some differences, you know, but we can live with them as long as the power and the attack is very similar. I think that's important. Let's see, I have a few more examples that I want to talk about. Let's see, in the Couperin, where's my Couperin, here we go. You know, a lot of this music sounds really neat when you put a capo on, because it just brightens it up so much more than, here we go. I've played this piece a lot, and so it goes, so just make sure you can see my right hand. And so on, and the whole piece is just full of these little takes out. If you notice, I'm working hard not to get the trills too fast, right? So that you have the nice, so you really feel all the notes, you know. The temptation for many of us is to do this kind of speeding up towards the end. And so you trill kind of sound at the end. I would really try and avoid that, right? A trill can have a bit of an acceleration towards the end, if you like, but controlled. It really sounds so much better, so much more powerful and crisp if you don't do that. There's another one of Couperin's that's very famous. The little barricades, you know, they. Here. So here I've got an upper mordant. Because it has, there's time to actually stick it in, starting playing 4 notes. 3 notes is more than enough. It's just a little passing ornament, right? And then the ornaments that come at the end are going to be the longer ones. Another thing that Tom reminded me of earlier, when we play our ornaments, this is going back to the technique again, but connected to where we're going to use it. Normally, when a keyboard player plays an ornament, not always, but many times, what happens is that the ornament comes before the beat, right? It goes da-dee-dum, and on the beat is the bass note. Whereas most of the time on the guitar, we put the bass note on the first note of the ornament, right? So we have to go like this. And we have the bass note, well, I put an A or a C. So right? But sometimes it's better to do that. So, and get the ornament and actually play it before the beat. It really sounds nice when you can do it well. To do that, obviously, if you've got too many notes, it's not going to work. But most of the time, if the piece is not too fast, so I've practiced that a lot to make sure that my thumb comes in here, right? And it's more difficult when you have 4 notes, right? So there we're kind of fudging it because I'm going bass, and the beat actually comes on the last note, but the bass note has come early. When it's a cadential one, you can use the thing of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and on the 6th note, if it's the index, your thumb is going to be free, right? So that's the way I do it. I know, Misa, you use a different pattern which frees up at a different moment. So Misael will teach you all how to use his pattern. Yeah, wait. Yeah, I can see you, because that's why I just remembered, because we talked about it before, and his pattern, you can get the thumb free at a different point in the pattern, right? It would be good to be able to use them both, really, because sometimes you're going to need the thumb sooner. Most of the time, our music, our playing, if you like, is not so perfect. So at times, if something is slightly off and that bass note is just in front or whatever, I can live with it. I can't live with it if it's like this, right? And then it has to be, so if you finish your trill on the thumb and then you've got to jump down, you're going to lose the rhythm. And if it's an important cadential moment, it's not going to be so good. Now, some of the tricks I used before, let's see if I can remember some. I'll go to the handle. What I used is this, okay. Okay, I don't know if you can see, you got to see both hands for this trick, right? Boom, there's an ace. No, so it's the trill. I'm going to finish at that, and then I just played the bottom note there with the left hand. Right? If it's a bottom note, it's pretty easy to do. If it's a covered note, if you needed that note, let's see. Okay. If you, you may at some point need that. It's not so easy if you're having to use two fingers to pluck the note, one holding and one plucking, you know. But if it's an open string, it's really quite easy to do, just to learn to play it with the left hand. So which note do we have? Right, works out pretty easily, right? I used that 3 or 4 times in this transcription. After some years, I learned to do it, and I just use the and just use that one where I finish. I didn't used to know how to do that. But I must say, if in this occasion, on this bar, it makes the trill quite short. Right? Because that note comes really soon, whereas the other one, the old one, sorry, the trill is just a little bit more generous, and we can almost extend that moment. You learn to do both and then choose.
Sort of trills, it becomes difficult to make sure that you're maintaining the same rhythm that's been marked. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the way you think about the rhythms and, you know, any diminuendo or slowing down or anything, and making sure that everything stays within those boundaries that the composer gives you, or extending out a little bit extra just to make it more dramatic or something like that.
Well, what I would say is that many times when we hear our ornamentation and trills, many of us end up fudging the rhythm. You know, that is, we take more time about it than really should be. When it's a cadential trill, perhaps it's a moment where there's a little bit more flexibility. And I would say more than just what the composer has laid out. You have to think of what the audience is feeling in terms of the rhythm. Now, if you suddenly stop on that trill, it's really hurt the flow. You know that, let's see, the famous fugue. There's several places where there are trills and anything, and I can't remember, but now those trills, those small cadences, I feel very uncomfortable when people lose the rhythm there, right? And so whatever you are adding in, say, whatever extra notes, make sure that you can do it in time, so that you choose. If you later decide, no, I want to slow down on this, I want to make a big deal of this moment, okay, that's fine. But you have to make sure that your technique is able to keep that rhythm going, right? You know, if not, your technique is or your lack of it at this moment is choosing the rhythm, right? So I think I would prefer to have a smaller trill rather than a bad rhythm trill, right? Unless you are convincing enough with your change of rhythm. Yeah, you know, say at the end of, you know, of that thing. So in that case, you've actually relinquished rhythm. So people are not expecting, you know, those kind of cadences. You can go to town. I mean, that's fairly simple. You could do more ornamentation in the exit or in the entry to the trill, and it would be fine. So if the ornament is in a moment when the pulse of the piece is not so important, go to town and enjoy it. But if the pulse is a really integral part of the piece at that moment, the ornament really has to not hurt it. So I don't know if that's a complete answer for you, but I think that's the way I feel. And I must say, many times, I mean, you've seen my lessons, many times we end up working on the ornaments because the player has lost their rhythm in that moment. Okay.
David, just to follow up on Lucas's question. So when you put the passing seventh there, are you playing that the index finger and the A at the same time? Is that the trick you're using to get there?
Yeah, this case here, you know, um, in the lute version, there are many more notes, but sometimes what is better, to have all the notes and have a bad trill, or have a good trill and enough to suggest that it's a B7. You know, so in this case here, the way I've played it is, and I just come down. So on this one, I finish the trill and then play the seventh. Or, yeah. And I just want that passing note, the seventh into the A to G sharp, because it's there, and I think it really is an integral part, although obviously the violin maybe didn't have it. But so in this case, I'm not going to go, how would it be? You know, so I'm too disappointed with that trill, or here. So I prefer the power.
For your right hand, you end up with on the D sharp with the thumb, and then you hit the other bass after?
Yes, on the F, but I just get down as quick as. So I don't know if you can see my.
Oh yeah, it's an F sharp. I'm sorry. So
yes, yeah. Because I want to.
And what finger are you playing the A with?
A-I-M-P, A-I-M-P.
And then the passing seventh note. What do you play with? What finger are you using?
Sorry. I'm just jumping down. It's as I say, our piece in this moment has relinquished rhythm. So there's a kind of chaos that happens while you're playing this dominant chord. It's not structurally rhythmic, right? And the feeling of chaos finishing when you go. So I don't mind it being completely out of rhythm and even out of place a bit, and then in time. It's the resolution is chaos to things in its place.
You said something about the rhythm. Can you say something about the tonality that interacts in putting the trills in? For example, leading tones especially, or things like that?
Okay, well, all these pages. No, if you do this, it can't be, because the moment you do that, you're modulating into another key, or that. So if you're sitting in E and you want to ornament the note, ornament in the key. But if you're in E minor, you can use the D natural. But in E minor, you could also use the D sharp. So in a minor key, often there are moments when you have to really choose carefully, right? That was all I meant about the tonality, right? And it's much more important if, let's say, if you're going to go, right? You obviously can't go, you can't use that note, right? So if you're going to do a long run into it, it would have to be those notes. You can't do that. Your ears will tell you, but your ears and your knowledge of harmony should tell you that. Okay, because if you went, you're saying, you know, you're obviously taking it into a different key. So whatever key you're in, make sure that whatever ornaments you do, that they fit in well. Right?
Hey, David, I have a question. You talked about before some interesting things about, you know, whether to do trills like that on Giuliani or even perhaps other Baroque composers like Weiss and so forth. What's your take on Renaissance ornamentation? Do you use uh, any cross string trills there at all? And I think there's a question that Tom also had brought up at some point. And yeah, I'm just wondering what your general sort of approach is to ornamenting a piece in the Renaissance period.
Yeah. Well, you know, a lot of Renaissance is also keyboard music. So, you know, if you're playing say William Byrd or something, you know, it's all keyboard music. Some of it was transcribed to the lute and played by lutenists, but so it would maybe depends whose name is there as a composer. You know, if it's Dowland, then I wouldn't do it. You know, I would either play those the pluck note ones like the lute players do, either use that or play the kind of just the little ornaments, that the little twiddles or the little, you know, little things like that obviously they did. I think it's if you're transcribing Renaissance music, but it comes from another instrument. I've got some stuff here that, you know, I was going to say, because a lot of these, you know, now you can get all of this stuff on internet and things. This is a guy called Robert Jones, right? But he's from the same time as Purcell and, you know, these English guys. It's beautiful music, I mean, I think. And he gives a whole series of stuff as to what his ornamentation signs mean. Since then, many things have become standardized, but of course, this is keyboard music. And so if you're going to play it, you don't need to play it like a lutenist would be playing it, because you're doing it on this instrument, not the lute. So when you say Renaissance music, I obviously, I assume what you mean is Dowland type of music. And, you know, Dowland, it's a bit like Bach, that he's haloed. If you played some Robert Jones, nobody's ever heard of him, so you do what you want. You could even give it a different date if you know, I mean, you're not going to do that, of course, but it's, you are freer with music that is not known, right? So you are freer to maybe use two strings, especially small ornaments that are just little passing notes. I don't know if you can hear me, but little passing notes that on two string, I think sound fine in all styles, you know, if they're played tastefully, if you like. But don't do it in Dowland, because Dowland and some of the other well-known, especially the English, Da Milano, these guys, it's not going to help the music. It's not going to make it any better.
Thank you.
Look, just sing as this is actually going in the different direction, but you all know this piece. Okay, so we get that. And then, so if you do it well, I don't know the piece, but I used to play it. But I used to often play this with the ornament on two strings. Sounds beautiful as well. I mean, and that is actually closer to what Albéniz would have heard when he was playing it on the piano than that, right? It depends on your ability to make it smooth or not. And this one I did for fun. I mean, just it sounds perfectly good on the left hand to have a trill that goes. Sorry, that would be. Perfectly good, you know. But at times, why not try something else? So that's why I changed to the that one, and so on. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, no, that's great. Before I forget, if it's okay, I'll ask a follow-up question. I know a lot of times you talk about a crescendo sort of built into the into the trill, or actually decrescendo in most cases, especially when considering that the last note that usually falls on the thumb shouldn't have an accent. Is there a way that you sort of approach that when you practice? I mean, of course, purposefully either doing a decrescendo, but is there some way that you sort of program it into your hand when you learn a piece?
I think it's, you know, in the classes, say in the lessons and things, so many people end up kind of thumping the last note, and often, you know, it's not that I want the last note necessarily quieter. It's just that it shouldn't necessarily have a thump. You know, sometimes yes and sometimes no, and there are moments when the last note of a trill should have more power. And there are moments when it actually is better if it goes in the opposite direction. So to learn,
I was thinking about that when you talked about how sometimes in the keyboard, for example, the trill actually sounds more powerful than the section before, which it should. Of course, it's the cadential stuff. So sometimes you know, it's interesting to address each, I guess, each moment in specific in a piece, because sometimes, like you said, sometimes it feels better to kind of go for the trill and just do a crescendo on the trill, but then if
yeah.
you kind of whack the last note, it kind of takes it away. So it's sort of a little bit weird for guitar, I think. And I'm just wondering how you generally think of that. You know, a big cadential trill at the end of a large section, you usually kind of want to go for more volume, but at the same time you have to be careful, of course, of not overdoing it and not whacking the last note like you were talking about.
Well, I would use my ear and hopefully choose one or the other, right? Sometimes, perhaps in the classes, I've asked people to be careful with the last note or learn to play it gentler, but sometimes people's thumb has a fatter sound than the fingers. And so it goes diddly boom. You know, the change in sound itself often makes the last note the least beautiful of the trill, and yet it should be the most beautiful in some ways. It should be the note, well, it's one of the notes that we should enjoy when you go. So that last note is the one that you're going to actually live with, whereas if you play that last note ugly, in an ugly way, it's a pity. And I found a place in, actually it was in that lovely little piece by Bach, fingering. Let's see if I can find it, because sometimes trills, when they have there's that one, and then it was so sometimes it's good to have a loud note, whether it's from the left hand trill or the right hand trill. That was a little bit ugly, but so I'm trying to actually have a beat on the end of the trill. Right, but so if the piece is going to do that, it's actually better to smooth out, and so the last D you have to be much more gentle. If it was, sorry, then strong D, gentler D. But so you need to control the power. You understand what I mean? So each situation is going to dictate whether it's strong or not. But Misa, one of the things we can use is when you want to make a crescendo in your trill. Often, instead of thinking of the crescendo, you just do a little bit of an accelerando, and you actually get a crescendo because the notes are piling up on each other. A bit like when we talked about tremolo often. You know, if you speed up and slow down your tremolo, that will give a sense of volume growing or diminishing, right? And here as well, as you speed up, it actually sounds more powerful. Whether it's really louder or not, it's not so important. It's the feeling that it's giving that I think is important. Okay, let me continue, because Edwin's written here a question, a long question. Okay, he's talking about the whole thing about the original key. Hi there. Hi, Edwin. How are you? About if you make a transcription in the original key or not, and also you know, if we use cordatura, capo, also the problem with whether we use the old tuning, well, that is lower an A. Is that what you meant? A4 forte or A, or yes, lower down. Yeah. You know, I don't have a perfect pitch. That is, so if something is half a tone out, as long as it's in tune with itself, I'm happy, right? And also, because I grew up listening to pieces in different keys from where the original was, doesn't really bother me, right? And in fact, if it is too uncomfortable on the guitar, what you gain by say this is the original key, you lose by the quality of the performance. Unless you can perform it really well, but if it's too uncomfortable, it hurts our performance. So choosing a key can often be very, very important for our instrument because of the nature of our instrument. I mean, it's not an easy instrument, and we want to use the open strings to let us get around. Some keys on the guitar sing better than others. You know, the guitar just comes alive, and then if you put it a tone lower, boom, it's dead, or so on. But usually when I transcribe pieces, I really try different keys to find out if it's going to work better in another key. And you say there about the scoratura. Yeah, at times, of course, detuning especially, you know, but sometimes could use some other tunings. It would be interesting, especially, you know, if you're playing a piece and it actually sounds or works best in F, and you're not going to need the bottom note, why not tune up to F? I mean, Fernando Sor did it, and others have done it, you know. And then there's the other question of the F sharp tuning in the middle, which often actually makes us, it facilitates a lot of other things, because the third is moved to a different place, you know, on our strings. So at times, though I haven't used it much, but at times I think it's a very good idea. You know, just talking about that, obviously, when Misa asked me about the Dowland and things, I would almost always, not always, but almost always, if I was playing anything written originally for the lute, use the F sharp tuning, if it's the, you know, the Renaissance lute. And then when it's written for the Baroque lute, there is a big problem with this tuning thing, because for them often it was really quite easy to play. Well, that is the fingering, whatever. And for us, it's just maniacally difficult. And there was a guy in Belgium a long time ago, and this is 50 years ago. So he published, his name is something Pyenbroek, and he published a lot of pieces, some by Weiss, but also by lesser known Baroque players, where he had F sharp and a D. And it was really, so he had that on the top, right? And then a D tuning the bottom. And some of the pieces were actually noticeably easier. And also he chose a key that would work with this tuning. And not only easier, but actually the instrument sings in a different way. And so it was really nice. I learned some pieces of his transcriptions a long time ago, and yeah, they were nice. I mean, then just to continue with your questions, to get back into tune, you asked about the capo. Yeah, I think, for example, you play often as a duo, and at times the pieces struggle in F sharp or in G or something, but it would be really easy in E. Just use the capo. You know, sometimes you say, oh, but I'm losing one bass note. Oh, come on, you lose one bass note and gain 200 good higher notes. You know, it's worth it. Then also, I often use the capo because it changes the sound of our guitar. You know, I'm sure many of you have done, wait. When you do this with the capo on, it's still the same piece, but it's interesting because it just has a different kind of brilliance to it that, at least on my guitar, I struggle to get when I'm in D, right? Now, the other question is do we try to play the tuning that Bach may have heard? if you like. It doesn't, it's not something that keeps me awake, if you like. And I find that sometimes when you tune down, some guitars tune lower, some are okay, some don't. This guitar doesn't sound very good when I go lower. Actually, it's better if I'm just above 440. It just, there's some notes that just kind of start to ring better than when I'm lower. But on some guitars, it's perfectly okay. I would go more with how your guitar sounds. And I was going to put the example of a singer. I did some concerts with a singer a couple of years ago. He's a kind of tenor, but as he's quite an old man now. And his voice has got lower. And so he's really a baritone, but he's singing some of these songs that are, you know, so everything he wanted it 3 semitones lower, because he wants it where his voice is best. And, you know, you can't do that for the whole opera so that the baritone or the tenor can sound great, but you can do it for a recital. So it's not something that particularly worries me. It's different when you talk about if you're going to do the well-tempered clavier or something like that, because Bach is actually using the steps of keys. And Bach also often played with this whole idea of a note has a value. You know, a B flat's a B flat. It's not, you can't sort of move it in relation to something else. You know, so I mean you can, but he may have had some other ideas about what notes meant than most of us. You know, Edwin, just to finish off with the capo thing. I also find that sometimes ornamenting a little higher, you know, when you put the capo down, the strings just feel different. And actually it's even easier on the left hand a little bit. You know, the pressure on the second fret is different from the first fret, noticeably different. So when you put a capo on 1 or 2, the amount of pressure you need on these frets is less. Also, when you're doing cross the string trills, you're doing an awful lot of extension. You know, and you're trying to hold the chord down. So this is much easier here than it is here. You know, it makes a difference, just 2 frets. Well, big difference. So that's one more reason.
David, I appreciate it if you could just show people maybe closely, I think, I'll have an observation and then I'll follow with a question. Okay. One of the reasons why his trills sound so ridiculously good is that they sound ridiculously good, is because all of his fingers can get the same quality of sound. So his A finger, his I finger, his M, his P, he can really get a super even sound. And if you've been around him close, you can attest that it's one of the beauties of his playing. Could you just show us your concept of do you use this joint, with a free stroke? Yeah. Where do you originate the joint, the stroke? And then another question is, how long do you consider your stroke to be? Is it way long at your hand? Is it a short little stroke, etc.?
It's very little before the string and more after, but not. I practice when I'm warming up. I practice taking it further than I need, so that I can feel no resistance. And then when I play, it doesn't do that, you know. So that's an A. Wait a sec. I'm out of tune. So you can see. Right, but I try to keep it fairly flexible, you know. I would say my fingers are close to a circle. You know, if you put a small tennis ball, or a small apple or something in there, that's the shape. That's my shape. You know, so all the knuckles are used a bit. And there are times when I go straighter. If I want it to sound kind of clicky and bright, you know, if I want that kind of sound, I'm pulling kind of upwards. You can see, and pulling straight and up. And I'm, get the thumb out of the way. I'm also tipping from here to here. So high, there. Like Breen, he used to play dead straight fingers. Rest in peace. Right? Whereas I play around there. But, you know, it's funny because you see someone else play and they use a completely different right-hand technique. And if it sounds great, well, why not try it? You know, it may not fit your hand, but I think it's interesting to watch. You ask somebody to pick up a glass of water, and some people hold it like that. Other people hold it like this. You know, they have the hands have a kind of natural movement, or they pick up, I don't know, a pen. You know, and you'll find that most of the time my fingers bend a bit more from there and not so much from here, but a bit from there. And you look at other people, some people bend a lot from here and not so much from there. Or you see the people that play like this, where this is almost flat and all the turn is here. There are good players from all of those, but maybe advantages and disadvantages in each one, right? And I think in my way, there are some disadvantages in that when you go across the string quite a lot, it takes quite a long time to actually pluck the note, you know, and the person that's going straighter from no pluck to pluck is very immediate. And often the super fast music actually sounds better where the notes sparkle out, you know. Those ones don't sparkle out, they are slower to grow, right? So learn to use both. And so I would say I use this angle, right? So it goes the angle that goes like that, but also this angle, right? So higher wrist, lower wrist. And learn to use them both. And for the trills, I actually use higher wrist. Not that, right? Right. So the higher wrist means that I flick the string. It needs much less. There's more resistance on the string, but the amount of time you spend on the string is very little, right? When you do this, there's very little resistance to the string as it slips across, but you're on the string for, I mean, we're talking about milliseconds, but you're on the string for longer. So it creates problems and solutions. You know? I don't know if that's enough. Any other things, Tom?
No, that's perfect. Thank you, and you revealed a lot of great things. Well, we're getting close to the end of this presentation here. I want to bring up Julian Breen's name for a moment and say that congratulations, David, on recording the Jerry Garcia piece.
Yeah.
Wow, you pulled that off pretty quickly. I know, David.
I just learned it right there and then, and just when he sent me it, I just thought, I'm going to record this. And I got like the fancy lights out, and I thought I'm going to do it with dark.
That was really fabulous. And if you haven't seen it, I think it's on his Facebook page.
Yeah, probably. I think maybe Maria put it on the YouTube, on my YouTube. I'm not sure. I think she was going to. It's also on Dennis Talks, because I used his guitar.
Right.
And so Dennis put it on his Facebook or whatever.
Well, I want to use that as a segue. So our hope here is every Friday to have a Zoom conference like this, and I'll say that I'm very honored that David started this, and we're more than happy to, if you send me ideas, subjects, people who you would like to have here, we're gonna keep it going. So virtually keep celebrating the art form we all love, and there you go. So David, bravo, thank you.
Hey, thank you.